generational shift playbook. $84 trillion in assets are going to go from old, dusty brands to some new brand. And who's that going to be? And is Goldman going to be one of them, I guess, right?
Yeah. I hope so.
So I'm going to go drum up some business outside because the food's so good.
Okay.
But please welcome Walter Agumbi, and I will go out and just try to get everyone worked up, but
go ahead and
get started.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. So I think the numbers are really somewhat overwhelming. When you think about 85, 86 trillion dollars that's supposed to pass from one generation to other generations, that's a compounding number. What I want to talk about today is some of the approaches that we take when we think about content, when you think about Gen X, when you think about Gen Y. And I won't start describing what these generations are. I think we all know what they are. But what I'd love to do is to kind of walk you through the way we think about content and the way we think about how do we reach this generation. So there are 3 points that I want to start with. Number one, I think it's really important when you think about this generation to understand the things that really drive them. You know, they're passionate, they're values-driven, they don't like to be sold, which I think we all know that. So when you think about content and when we think about how do we reach this generation here, that generally they have an adverse reaction sometimes to advertising, what are some of the things that as a firm that you can do, especially in financial services? Number one, for me, I think what's really important, and from experience what I've seen has really worked, is you've got to move from transacting with a generation to trust building. And what do I mean by from transaction to trust building? What I mean by that is simply credibility comes from education, credibility comes from openness, credibility comes from transparency. Again, we are a society that generally, when you think about products and services, and particularly in financial services, there's always that element of selling that product, constantly selling that product. A lot of our content from a marketing perspective is built around selling product. But I'd want to just all of us to think about how do we think about this in the context of this new generation that really is not really privy to being sold products, sold services. And that's the element that I want to talk to you about here is that credibility is really going to come from how do you educate them, how do you not sell to them, how do you make them feel like you're addressing some of the most important things for them. The other thing that I want to point out here, just along with the same theme here, is really moving from focusing on selling to teaching, informing, and educating. Financial services are inherently complex. I'm in the asset and wealth management business. And you know, when you start talking to somebody about investments, about all the different asset classes, all the different investment solutions, the permutations, what you need, that's not really easy. When you think about $85 trillion that's supposed to pass down to other generations, summing that up is not easy. You've got public, you've got private investments, and then you've got things that are in between there. But what we've seen from just interacting with this generation, there's a significant desire for them to learn. And learning is not learning so that they can buy your investment products. Learning is just learning so that they can understand the nuances of finance. So it's really, really important as we think about content, we focus the value on really moving away from selling rather to teaching, to informing, and to inspiring. And then connected to that, you really want to make it, and the way we've done it in our own end, you want to make it really human. Goldman Sachs, we pride ourselves with having experts across the globe on a number of topics. So when you go to our digital properties, you're going to see a lot of investors, you're going to see a lot of experts in their own realm, distributing content. Again, not selling anything, but distributing content that ranges from macro topics, geopolitics, AI, what's going on, interest rates and the Feds, all the way down to how should investors be thinking about these things that are happening today in the context of investment products. So, I mean, those three elements here, I think, can really be helpful as we think about how do you reach this generation. The key point here is you're not necessarily constantly always selling to this generation, but rather you're using content and you're using marketing as a way of building relationships with this generation. Now, how do you do that, or how do we do that? There are a number of ways in which we can do that. Again, it's really want to distinguish between selling from a marketing perspective, and also just content that is around training, educating, and making sure that people learn. So there are a number of things that we do as a firm that we've done that have really worked well. One, I would say just thought leadership. Thought leadership, it can be broadly defined in a lot of different ways, but tackle topics that are relevant to the generation. When I say topics that are relevant to the generation, there's a lot of conversation out there in today's world, for example, around AI. Again, when you're talking about AI from a thematic perspective, you're not talking about selling or offering any given topic or any given solution or product. You're simply talking about something that everybody, young generations, old generation, they use. So really being involved and being relevant in those discussions is really important. So really go beyond the topics that around products that you sell, because if you continually focus on products and solutions that you sell, it makes it very easy to go back to the first point that I talked about, building trust. And then the other thing also here that is really connected to thought leadership is really establishing yourself as the authority for that specific discipline that you're in. You want to signal that you have the intellectual prowess to be able to tackle, again, that particular topic that you're talking about. Remember, all I've talked about up to this point has really nothing to do with the investment solution. If we go back to, again, what we just talked about, trillions of dollars are going to be moving from one generation to another. The people that I don't think are really going to capture those assets are the people that are going in and saying, you need to buy this investment product, you need to buy this mutual fund, you need to put the money into this annuity, you need to put money into this ETF. It's the people that are going to be helping this generation understand the nuances of what's happening on the macro element and how they should be thinking about the investment. So from a tactical perspective, one that I've really talked about is thought leadership. And one of the things that we do, within the asset management business in particular, we create a clear distinction between what is thought leadership and what is marketing material. With thought leadership, we don't talk about products at all. We may talk about asset classes, but we don't go in and talk about products. And I think this is really important for this generation because there's a desire and a need for them to learn and be educated, especially given the complexity that we see with the market. We do have a content hub, really one place where you can find a lot of this information, where you can aggregate, articles, short videos, interviews, and we find that this really appeals to this younger generation in particular. If you're giving them different formats, let them choose. You might have an article that is 2,000 pages. That article may be summarized in 5 bullets. That article may be expressed as a video that somebody can watch in 30 seconds, in 90 seconds. So think about the goal of what that content or communication is, and then the different ways in which you can disseminate it. And these different ways in which you disseminate it, they're going to address a lot of the audiences that you have that. A pension specialist may want to read the 2000 white paper, but a financial advisor who might be younger may just want to read bullet points that they can convey to their end investor. And a young person who's learning about finances, they may just want to see a 90-second video. But at the end of the day, all these different mediums, they really speak to the same content here. You're just distributing it based on different audiences that you have there. And then the other thing also just that is really connected to that is storytelling. Again, this is about just making sure that you want to grab mind share, and the way you grab mind share is not talk about your product features. The way you grab mind share is you tell a story. So thought leadership is critical, a content hub is critical, and one of the things that we've done, and we make it even public, we have different formats within the firm that we share this content. We have something that we call GS Exchanges. This is a podcast. It's all publicly available. We bring in leaders from the firm and also leaders from the outside for an hour riveting discussion on a variety of topics. And it's interesting. We find a cross-functional audience that typically tunes into that. We have the markets, which is, again, a video series that we do that really is very topical, talks about things around the capital market. Lots of interest, again, across board. Remember, all this is not selling any product in particular. And then the last one is talks. Talks are just interviews with key personnel, again, all publicly involved, publicly available information on our website. And when you think about talks, that's where we can bring in people that actually are relevant to these young generations. Over the last 6 months, we've featured the #1 woman golfer in an interview series that we have with them. We've featured Medal of Honors recipients as part of that. Remember, these are things that have nothing to do with the investment products or financial services that we provide, but it just shows that we are relevant and we are bringing relevant topics to different audiences. We featured one of the best free solo climbers to talk about adversity and how do you handle challenges and how do you overcome challenges, not selling product, but just being in conversations that are relevant to this market. The other aspect from a tactical perspective that I think is also important is, again, what I've stressed out enough here is creating education and an education hub. It's really interesting, again, when you think about financial services and when you think about investments, there are so many people out there that provide sort of like what I would say quasi-investment or quasi-advice services on YouTube, on Instagram. But as credentialed firms, I think it's really important to really note that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for really non-biased, non-product focused type of financial services education. And it's really important to create a spot and a place where you can provide that for the audiences. And then the last one, which I think is really important, is also just really providing research services that are really touch on this generation. One of the best things that we've done, and we're in the 10th year of doing that, every year we do an intern and analyst survey. So we survey our interns across the globe, basically to get their insights. And again, how many companies do that? We just want to hear them out. These are young people that are still in college or in their first year of work. We're not selling anything. We're just saying that we care enough about you that we're going to invest money and we're going to actually solicit your inputs. And I'll give you just some stats, and these are all publicly available. And we are in our 10th year of doing that intern and analyst survey. We surveyed 2,600 interns speaking 85 languages from 500 plus universities in 45 countries across 95 nationalities. And one of the things that we also do, once we publish that report, one of the things that we do is we have a section there on, what is it that they would advise other interns as they come in and other younger professionals as they come in. Again, this is just not talking about any particular product at all, but just being in the conversation and really caring for the audience that you serve by not just selling them also, but also just, in this case, soliciting their input and soliciting their views. So what are the key takeaways? I think when we think about reaching this generation, one of the things that I'll probably say is, and it really, frankly, it applies across board. There are a few key takeaways that I just wanted to share with before I open it up for Q&A. One is just consistency. You want to make sure that you're consistent across every touch point, reinforcing the same values. Whatever those values are, expertise, access, credibility. That consistency is important. You don't want somebody to have an exceptional experience coming to your YouTube channel or LinkedIn, and then the experience does not translate when they go to your website. Another one is just transparency. Feature real people. Again, we do a lot of that. We've got experts across different areas. Feature real people, real research, real conversations, build storytelling around that. And you'll see that in different formats, in the short videos that we have, and even sometimes in the Q&As that sometimes we might have, like with a portfolio manager, or a Q&A we might have with a market specialist for a particular region. And then again, connected to that is just also just being human and being real. There's continues to be a level of opaqueness sometimes in financial services, but it's really important to be real. So people, when they see the firm, when they see you, they can actually see actual individual. Critical question to answer as we think about how to reach this generation is not focusing so much on what you sell, but so much on what you stand for as a brand. What is it that you stand for? Once you really clarify that, then the products and the services and the solutions will naturally come in there. So I just wanted to open up with a few of those thoughts and then maybe just open it up. What I'd love to do is just have dialogue and just open it up for questions. Questions, comments? I think there's one right at the back.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
How is Goldman Sachs adapting to this new great wealth transfer? Like, how are you going after Gen Z, whether now or in 5 years or 10?
So one of the things that, again, connected to what I've said is really demystifying what investments are, what financial planning is, what asset management is. And when I say demystifying, is really continually leveraging plain speak, especially when we talk about topics that are relevant for this generation. And when we think about Goldman Sachs and Goldman Sachs Asset Management, we also walk through advisors, right? So when we walk through advisors, part of what we're trying to do is to really simplify the narrative around what these investment products are, so that at least when they talk to their end investors have clarity on what they're getting into. Now, again, these assets are going to transfer over time, and by transferring over time, it gives a lot of financial services the opportunity not just to sell individual products, but also to help them see how they can help this generation, number one, learn about the investment landscape, and then number two, really work with the people that they work with. In this case, they work with financial advisors, empower the financial advisors to have enough knowledge and information about how to address specific needs. It's not about how to sell the product, but how to address specific needs to solve whatever outcomes that they're trying to solve.
So I have a channel question.
Sure.
Many of my clients would say when you're targeting this group, you need to go to the new channels, right? Snapchat. But I want to ask you, what are the channels that you think are actually credible? Because you might be on Snapchat, but that doesn't mean you want financial information or financial education in that context. So are there channels that you think are better suited because it's where they are, but it's also they're in the right mindset when they're in that channel?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And one way I'll answer that question, at least from my own personal experience, again, going back to the asset management business. One channel that we found that has been very effective and we're growing quite a bit there is LinkedIn. Again, LinkedIn, because if you think about what we just discussed here, we work through advisors. We have a lot of insights that we want to share. It naturally lends itself as a channel where we can actually express our views, but not just express our views. We can bring people closer to the exceptional expertise that we have here. And we find, interestingly enough, a wide variety of people that actually really engage with our posts. And when I say engage, it's not just about liking them. They engage in the context of even providing comments. I mean, we have a lot of students, university students, young people that comment on whatever topic it is that we have on like a LinkedIn, whether it's a macro topic about what's happening in the world or an AI topic or what's happening with conversations that are going on with the economy. So that's one channel that has really worked with us. But I'll also say, again, apart from just social channels, the web still continues to be an important place where you really want to make sure that if you don't have robust presence, you continue to have robust presence. There are other places that obviously also work, like YouTube from a video perspective, particularly short videos. They tend to lend themselves really well when it comes to that. But if I was to take a step back and say, which one do we think are we working with that really helps us to really push our message even to this generation, I would probably say LinkedIn really ranks up there.
Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you. Question for you. So what I'm hearing is it's really important to educate, to be credible, to not sell. I'm curious on your perspective about entertainment. You see brands like fintechs like Chime exploding because their content feels more like a Mr. Beast challenge. They lead with big influencers. And I'm wondering if you see entertainment as a potential risk for your brand and how you balance that against the risk of your content never reaching younger generations if it's not kind of funny and big and entertaining.
I think I'll probably answer that question much more broadly than more specifically around like what we do as a firm, just given also just some experience I've had from other firms that I've worked with. When I think about something like entertainment, you mentioned Chime. I'm sure, somebody may argue here that Robinhood also probably does a little bit of that. Some of these newer companies, they don't have sort of like the heritage of having other parts of their businesses that are more traditional, so they can actually do that. So I would say when you think of yourself as a brand, you have to think about what does the brand really stand for, and if there are parts of the brand where that doesn't really work, I'd probably say it will really be difficult to compete with newer brands that have emerged. That's all that they do. When you look at a firm like ours, we are an investment bank, we have capital markets, we have asset management. So entertainment may not be one of those things that we really probably are going to embrace as much as if you're a Chime or a Robinhood, you're targeting younger people, your products lend themselves for that sort of entertainment. I would look at it from that perspective. You really have to align all your outreach and efforts and content strategy around, what is sort of permissible for that brand. So that's how I'll probably answer that question. I think there's a question all the way at the back.
Thank you. This is awesome. Two-part question. So your approach seems to be more like a media company, which I think is very unique within financial services. Do you look externally at other industries for inspiration? And if so, who?
So we definitely look at other companies for inspiration. And one of the things that we look at is what are the brands that resonate the most in totality of what they offer from a product perspective and the experiences that they project, right? Like when you look at brands like Nike, Patagonia, you can have some important lessons there that you can learn. These are brands that have products, but they also have experience. Even, all of us here know Apple, right? What is that experience that you get with Apple that connects the brand with the uniqueness of that experience? So I think for financial services, again, also more broadly speaking, I would really look at these brands that really connect. They have loyal following, and I've mentioned a couple of those. What is it that they do that makes people really loyal with them? And I'll tell you, product is part of the equation. When Apple talks about their farm, and even when they talk about their products, they don't go as far as talk about particular features. What I've seen, at least, they focus on is the experience that the product and the features deliver. So that's a lesson that I'd probably say we want to draw in. What is the experience, the totality of the experience that you can get from some of these leading brands that particularly the younger generation really love the most? And these are a couple of examples that I've provided here. Maybe I'll ask this. Any firms here, any brands here that are doing an exceptional job from a content perspective that really resonates that maybe you might be willing to share with everybody? Yeah. So I think the mic coming up.
Yeah, we use organic LinkedIn and paid, but organic pretty effectively for our private banking, wealth management, and investment banking areas.
I find LinkedIn to be really effective. Also, that's a really good point there in the context of how immediate the feedback is that you typically do. So, if you're out at a conference, event, you launch a new product, or you do something, or you want to express your views, the immediacy of LinkedIn and the reaction that you get, and potentially even business that you may get, makes it really lend itself.
So we do the amplification of events, which are like such as this.
Sure.
But what we've really started doing is we've built out very specific substantive campaigns. So we're doing something for treasury management with a very specific cadence of insights into, we call it at the speed of money. So it's a campaign. It's sort of curated by the head of that whole business. We do the same thing with investment management. We do the same thing with private banking. Yeah. And it's been pretty effective. Our client-facing people, repost it with comments and really gets a lot of momentum.
And that's a really good point. One of the things that I think we find very effective with LinkedIn is that it gives you the ability to tailor message to different audiences depending on what they're looking for. So you can have a post that has a 90-second video, or it has a carousel that really educates in literally less than 10 seconds. But then out of that post, you have a link. If you want somebody to go read the full article, they can go there. So that's really what we were talking about in terms of you want to make sure that you treat content as sort of universal, but then where you disseminate it, you have different avenues for disseminating it. And then this different avenues typically would lend themselves to certain audiences. You think about your own personal experiences when you're looking at LinkedIn. I'm sure there are a number of places where you want to click and go deeper, and there are just some information that is presented that is good enough for you to be informed and make a decision on something that you're interested in. So that's a really good point. That's a great point. And questions, observations, comments? I think we have one.
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering if you could share any insight on like avoiding getting stuck in cliches, like all young people, are on Instagram and older generations are on Facebook, for example. Or I'd just be curious to hear how you're navigating the individual when trying to market to a whole generation.
That's a really good question. What I would probably say we tend to do is a lot of research up front before we make any decisions around what channels do we want to go to, how do we want to amplify certain things. And the fact that we have sort of like a set of places, when we think about the creation of content, we're also thinking about how we are going to amplify that content, whether it's for younger people or not. So we build that content, but as we're building that content, we're thinking about it. We're going to have it digitally. We're going to distribute it perhaps by email. We're going to have it on social, and social may just be restricted to, for example, in this case, LinkedIn. There may be a YouTube aspect to that. So we don't approach it in the context of, not knowing early on what are those places that we want to play in terms of their dissemination. Now, I'm sure there are companies here that really look at all particularly the social media, different channels that we have, different aspects of social media, and make some of those judgment calls. I think what we do is we just start with the actual content itself, and then we build an amplification plan around that. And that amplification plan is typically centered on things and properties, both organic and inorganic, that we already have. So we don't venture and say, this is something that we are building. We think that we now need to go open, a Snapchat account. We don't do that. We already have this testing ground, these digital properties. And it's just a matter of, for this content, for this campaign, which of these things that we already have that we're going to use.
Thank you.
Much for your contribution. It was a great session.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.